So Tyson Fury came out and he's very serious about fighting an MMA fighter. I don't know how serious Tyson Fury is about fighting an MMA fighter in MMA. And it seems that Stipe Miocic is the one and only guy that gets Tyson's attention. Not for nothing. I think we've done better with the experiment of taking an MMA guy and sending them to boxing than we have with the experiment of taking a boxing guy and bringing him to MMA. So I think that Tyson can win on this. I think that he's fine. But one thing that Tyson talked about last week is he said, I want to fight an MMA fighter. I want to fight him under boxing rules in a cage, but with MMA gloves. And I'm kind of scratching my head going, okay, when Tyson's talking about he wants to fight an MMA fighter, we do have that narrowed down to one guy. He's talking about Stipe Miocic. Fine. We understand that, and also stylistically, when you watch Stipe, how good he is with the hands, how he knocks everybody out, it goes right in line with the reason Conor McGregor was the one chosen to go over to boxing and fight Floyd. I got the story. I like that Tyson has the opponent. I would have to question a couple of things. It sounds to me as though if we're going to do boxing inside of a cage while wearing MMA gloves, we're now not doing MMA or boxing. It sounds to me as though we just created a sport. I haven't the foggiest idea why we would do that. And I happen to think if somebody said this to Tyson Fury, he would probably go, yeah, you're right. Why don't we just make it boxing? I do think as the world of silliness seems to develop around this, and we're all for something silly about every 3 to 4 years, every 5 years, we're ready to do something crazy. Bring James Toney over, send Conor over, bring in a pro wrestler, whatever it might be. There's a spot for that. And I have to tell you, I might be a little premature on this, but not by much. We're almost approaching the time, right? As the lapse between Conor and Floyd is now 2.5 years behind us. We're almost approaching that first 3-year gap, if you will, where, yeah, we could get away with something silly. There's some Logan Paul talk. I don't hate that idea as much as some people do. It seems like maybe Paul carved something out for himself and is doing it over there on design. I'm just sharing with you guys. Fury versus Stipe, I'm in. Fury versus Stipe, I think you guys in. Fury versus Stipe, MMA, yeah, okay, we'll watch, but there's not a lot to see there. Fury versus Stipe, boxing, yeah, we probably know how that outcome goes, but we're going to get some minutes out of that, most likely. If Conor shows us anything, and if we can carry that over, we're going to get some minutes. But we don't need to change the sport. And if there's any part of Fury that thinks he's going to get credit from the MMA fans because he agreed to do it in a cage instead of the ring, he's not. Do it in a phone booth, do it in a parking lot, do it in any apparatus that you want to do it, as long as it is sanctioned and legal, we'll go ahead and sign off. No credit for the ring. No credit for the cage. Doesn't make a bit of difference to the general public. I'm only sharing that in case Tyson has a different opinion and thinks that we somehow care about this cage and think that it somehow gives us a benefit. We don't. The 4-ounce gloves. I will agree with Tyson Fury that you have now just changed what you're doing. You have. The defenses that you have in boxing, some of the tucks, some of the rolls, some of that old school Tommy Hearns, one hand down, but you can use a shoulder to block it. You can get away with that with 16-ounce boxing gloves. You will not get away with that in an MMA glove. So the gloves do matter. I realize in MMA, we never have a conversation on this. We never have a sports show. We never have anybody looking and talking and arguing about the gloves. I fully am aware of that, but in boxing, they do. This was one of the sticking points, just to offer you an example that you guys will remember. But when Floyd was going to fight Conor, Floyd was so into the size of the gloves, where the gloves were made, Mexico versus China. This was a big deal. Whether they were made with horsehair or they were made with foam. I still remember when they went to Conor McGregor, and they thought this was going to be a big back and forth negotiation they were going to fight about. And Conor said, man, he could pick the glove for all the way. I don't care where it's made. I didn't even know they put horsehair in a glove. I don't give a damn what goes on my hands. I understood Conor's mindset because I don't know any of those things either. But I'm also an MMA guy, not a boxer. In boxing, it's a very big deal. Here's a rule that exists that most people don't know. This is a unified rule. You could do this in MMA. They do it in boxing. I've never seen it or even heard it discussed in MMA. But if I'm getting my hands wrapped, okay, I'm in the back getting my hands wrapped. A representative from my opponent's locker room can come in and watch that wrap. He can then complain. They could bring in a commission official. They could make you re-wrap it. They could approve it. But he can come in and watch you wrap your hands. That's actually a rule for MMA as well. But I've never heard it done. Coach Clayton never walked to an opponent's room. We never had an opponent in all the years walk over to our room and check those hand wraps. That's between you and the commission. Somebody sign off, and we don't care anyway. There might be something that we're missing. When I look at it, I tend to look at it from Conor's perspective, which is this is silly, and what does it possibly matter? I can't begin to answer that question for you guys. I haven't the foggiest idea what it matters, what the ounces are in relation to where it was made, whatever this horsehair versus foam business, I just don't know. But it seems to be a real thing. So what Tyson Fury is suggesting in many ways does level the playing field, which I think is his point. I think he's trying to say, I don't want to go into the full-blown MMA, but I'm willing to give you my element of MMA versus your element of MMA, and I'm even willing to concede the apparatus, and I'm even willing to concede the gloves to you. Now, that's a big concession for a boxer. Tyson is trying to make a point, show sportsmanship, and get the fight done. He is. The other side of it is he's never going to get credit for it because it just sounds weird. And it also sounds like, well, if Stipe goes over and beats Tyson in whatever this is, because now we can't call it boxing. Boxing must be contested, by example, in a 17-foot ring. Were you guys even aware of that? Boxing must be contested in a 17-foot ring. You can get an exception, but by the rules, it must be contested with 12, 14, or 16-ounce gloves, unless some kind of exemption is made by the executive director. I'm just sharing with you, my point being, there's certain things that have to happen for boxing to happen. There's also certain things that have to happen for MMA to happen. So if those things don't happen, you've now created a sport called, I don't know. So let's say Stipe goes over and takes the risk and deals with one of the greatest pugilists to ever exist. And we're about to find out in a couple of months on ESPN if he's currently the absolute best pugilist alive. Let's say Stipe goes and does that. What does Stipe get to say he beat him at? I mean, what do we call that? There's rules to what boxing is. That's not boxing. There's rules to what MMA is. That isn't MMA. What are we going to call that? What does Stipe tell his kids and his grandkids that he beat Tyson Fury at? And I realize that semantics might seem simple here, and I'm well aware that Stipe will take the opportunity if it's given to him, and he's going to put up one hell of a contest. I get the whole thing. But I do think if we're going to split hairs over where gloves are made at, whether they're created out of horsehair or foam, we're going to have to split some hairs on what is that called. All right, so my producer just chimed in with a question/answer. He told me that this is called hybrid boxing, that's what you would call it. But he followed up with a question of saying, how likely is this to happen? And I have to tell you, likeliness, I mean, what are we doing here? A scale of 1 to 10? We're probably at a 2. We could be as high as a 3, but you do have a couple of components here. You have Tyson Fury, who's saying he wants to do it. If we were to take him at his word, you then have Stipe Miocic saying he wants to do it. And nobody knows what the hell Stipe Miocic ever wants to do because he never tells anybody. He never talks to anybody. So the mere fact that we know that Stipe wants to fight Tyson means he really wants to fight Tyson for us to even have that info. You then are confronted with something else. Now look, Tyson's plate is full. Things change fast in boxing as they do in MMA. If Tyson gets through Deontay Wilder and Tyson is to then start doing a media tour and call out Stipe, and I don't predict that he's going to, but if, all of a sudden this number goes from a 2 to 3 to a 4 or 5. Now, something else, and maybe the main reason I'm bringing this up. Dana White and Floyd Mayweather had a photo taken together very end of 2019. Floyd came out and said he was going to do 2 fights within 2020. One of them was going to be against Pacquiao. Floyd put a poster out right after Conor defeated Cowboy, showed him and Conor on a poster, said, Mayweather versus McGregor part 2 coming up. And Dana let us in on a couple of clues saying, and this is a quote, the money is in Floyd competing. Now, where that got very interesting is Dana runs MMA. Dana's talking about running boxing. So Floyd and Dana teaming up, if we're to believe this has the idea to do with Zuffa boxing, okay, we just got shown something. How are they going to do it? But Dana didn't say box. And Floyd has hinted many times at doing MMA, of which he would never do and is nothing more than a ploy for attention in the media, but he gets it. So he's not going to stop saying it, so we're going to have to continue to address it, which is why the scam works. But there is something very interesting to the word that Dana used in competing. And if you come on the backs of that with Tyson Fury about doing it in a cage and MMA gloves, but a commingling, to which my producer Ryan is now calling hybrid boxing, which I can't disagree with even if I haven't heard of it before. News to me, but okay, great. I didn't have an answer. I'm going to have to accept this one. Let's just say those conversations are somehow intertwined. Let's say Dana had a conversation, which no evidence that it did. Let's say Dana had a conversation with Tyson Fury, talked about what he wants to do with boxing. Dana has a conversation with Floyd that we know did happen. Has a conversation what he wants to do with boxing. Floyd tells us he's going to fight twice in conjunction with Dana saying the money in Floyd is in Floyd competing, and then Tyson starts to lay out a few of the rules on how all of these three things could come together. We have no evidence that this triangle ever happened, but what if? What if? Maybe we are starting to get an idea of what Zuffa boxing is to look like, and let's just say we are. Of everything that was discussed, it seems to me the biggest reveal that we've gotten is from Dana, who used the word competing as opposed to saying MMA or as opposed to saying boxing. Perhaps one of these hybrids is what's on the horizon. Only perhaps. But in the world of what if, I think that makes it a lot of fun.